This is Unpivot, the show for Excel and Power BI users and anyone else who loves discussing data. This is episode 2. I'm Win Hopkins.
I'm Mark Proctor.
I'm Sue.
And I'm Giles Mail.
Oh yeah, Sue Bays.
Oh, you mucked it up already.
Full name.
Welcome everybody.
Just Sue.
No edits.
It's not Madonna.
No edits.
I'm just Sue.
I'm just Sue.
She's just known as Sue.
like Madonna.
So first of all, let's start with a question on everyone's mind after episode 1. Mark, have you been for another run?
I have. I've done 2. So it's only a week since last episode. Done 2. Yeah.
Well done.
Good. Well done. I'm not asking the other 2 about their running because it just makes me feel
I haven't. I've had 17 Guinnesses since we last spoke, but I haven't been on a run. Than this morning
Excellent
in preparation for this.
Is that on target?
Yeah, just
I
about.
have, obviously. I have done a half, done some 5-10k-ish things. So yeah.
Any other random news before we start talking data? Giles, I think you had
I've got an 11-month-old golden retriever staying with me at the moment.
Oh, Sue, the dogs are with you.
The dogs are with me, together
they
with my 3-year-old Vizslador. So I am stretched as they pull. And the golden retriever just stops in the middle of the road or in the middle of the pavement to watch people.
Yep, they're crazy dogs.
They're certainly characters. But that's my other news.
Are you all dog people?
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I've got Pippa.
Dogs, but...
I've got Pippa. Yeah, I prefer dogs to humans for the most part, to be honest. Yeah, so I love dogs.
Don't get me started on that because I can talk for an hour on that.
Right, not dog chat. We're not.
That's the topic of this episode.
Dogs. Running, dogs, yoga, swimming, sea swimming.
So Win, have you not got a dog? Are you left out?
No.
You left out from the dog chat and the running chat.
No
Again?
running chat, no dog chat.
Oh my God.
Maybe I just need to buy a dog that takes me for runs and then I can be part of the gang.
Well, that would
That's
help.
what I do with mine.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've got news. I've got a massive tattoo on my leg as of this week. I've turned 40. I think I mentioned last week that I've hit the 10th year of my midlife crisis. So I've got a tattoo. Went to get the Comrades logo, came out with a big epic Viking warrior halfway up my left thigh.
How do they upsell you on that? I just want
so They upsold me so easily, and it really hurts. Just for anyone that doesn't know, it really does hurt.
Wow. How long did that take?
I was in there one day, and then I've got at least another full day, so it's pretty much half done. So it'll probably be about 16 hours in total, I reckon. But yeah.
How can you stay still for that long? I couldn't stay still for that long.
Yeah, it's hard work. But anyway, I don't want to distract for too long. But you said, do we have any random news? In my head, I've become at least twice as cool as I was last week. Now that I've got a cool tattoo,
and with a cat as well.
Yeah, but this is. Okay, I'm going to swap this off. I think my just in my hot conservatory again. There we go. That looks a bit cooler, doesn't it?
Go on then, Win and Mark. Random news.
I'm not sure I've got any.
No, I got nothing this week. Nothing.
I painted my windows at the weekend. I was saying to Win beforehand. So before, when Win used to do Power Query Magic, I used to listen to Win every time I had to do DIY. So as soon as we had like our episode last time, and I was like, I'm going to listen to our own podcast, which I apologize, sounds quite sad, but I was there doing DIY because Win's on a podcast. So it's almost like that's what DIY does. So if Win stopped doing podcasts, nothing will get done around my house.
I'm not even going. Oh, Uncle Win.
Maybe I should be sponsored by, I don't know, what a home base
B&Q.
or something in the UK, or Bunnings in B&Q.
Base.
Yeah, Bunnings in Australia. So encouraging DIY around the world. So right, I want to get into some chat. Let's get into some proper stuff. So I did send out a little link to preempt you all about this one. This was a video that and a blog post that Jon Acampora did. Which is a little bit controversial, I would say. Now, for those of people who aren't aware of Jon, 10-year MVP, He's got a YouTube channel called Excel Campus that's got like 560,000 subscribers or something crazy. So, and he's a really good guy. I've met him a whole bunch of times. Actually, a little anecdote before we get into his post. First time I was at the MVP Summit, so I was a newbie, meeting all these new people. And there was a discussion going on about YouTube. And I think, my channel had, 1,000 subscribers, and maybe my most liked video was 2,000 likes or something. And they were talking about content, and I was like, oh yeah, anything over 7 minutes, no one watches that. And John, who sat there next to me, chill back, sort of Californian guy, just sort of nudges his laptop computer around to me and points to his 15-minute pivot table video that's got 14 million views or something crazy. And it's like, all right, yeah, sort of know it all win, put in his place quite kindly by John, to be honest. But anyway, so John's post was, and let me just read the heading, I've stopped recommending this Excel feature, which in itself, beautiful clickbait title,
yes.
Right? Very good. Okay, awesome.
Good.
I clicked on it. But what he was saying is essentially, you read it as well? Yeah, it's cool. So what he was essentially saying is that he doesn't recommend Excel tables anymore, which is, I love tables so much, which is controversial, right? But he goes in to say that he basically doesn't recommend them in the circumstances where there are inexperienced Excel users, because the structured table references are confusing to those people. They prefer A2 to A10 as a reference rather than, table 1 sales in square brackets. So I get it, but I don't agree with it. What's other people's thoughts? And this leads on to some other discussions as well, but just purely on tables to start with. Thoughts?
Do you want my BI perspective? Because
yeah, go Sue.
I use Excel primarily with Power BI or data sets. So for me, I don't like Excel unless it's in a table, because tables feed into Power BI. It makes data types. It makes the data types the same. It makes every column have the same type of data types. It has subject, it's structured, and it's, so when Wynne sent it to me, I went, well, I disagree. It has to be a table. And then he went, and I, said about the title. And he said, yeah, but this is, this is Jon. And then I thought, yes, it is. And he's training newbies and or newer people more than me. And then I thought back to when I started first looking at tables, and I was like, why is it doing that? And I couldn't understand why it was doing different things instead of the simplicity of the column reference. So that was my thought. So I would still prefer tables, but I can understand why.
Yeah, I've spoken to Jon about this in person in previous years, and I think his view is primarily around the structured references are confusing for people who haven't seen them before. But I think in terms of, if I think about the thing that I focus on most in terms of kind of how we automate our processes inside Excel, if you start from like the most basic level of automation, which is I have a formula, when the numbers change, it recalculates. That is like the basic level of automation, which anyone could do. But any formula that you then have, the next level is, well, I need my formula range to expand or retract when I get more data or less data. So tables are the thing that then gives you, like, level 1 is I have a formula. Level 2 is I have a table that expands and retracts when I have new data. Level 3 is then I get my data from Power Query. So you've kind of got this progression where it relies on tables because of the expanding and contracting of those data ranges. So without tables, you're kind of stuck with having to undertake manual actions. So I think they are a critical thing in almost everything we do. And as Sue said, that the fact you've got a structured form, you can't have repeat column names, all of those things that get Excel closer to a structured data has got to be a good thing. So there's so many good things about it. And he raised the point in the video about structured references, and when you start referencing the header row and other stuff, that the syntax gets confusing, and it does. But to be honest, most of the time you're just clicking with a mouse, or the IntelliSense pops up. So therefore, it's not it's not a big issue, but I would say I wouldn't give up on tables for anything, because they're fundamental to absolutely everything we do.
And I would agree. If you think of how Excel's changed recently as well, like to me, Excel tables it's like a hygiene factor. Like it's just a fun building block. It's very different to something like Lambda. I can completely understand why in lots of cases trainers might look at a group of people and go, all right, do not worry about Lambda. There are ways you can get around doing things. It's just going to confuse you. For me, if you didn't teach tables, you'd probably be promoting worse practices, because what would people would start leaning on, you reference an entire set of columns to make sure you cover future increases in data. I mean, I know of Jon's work, I hugely respect him, and but I wouldn't agree with not teaching tables. I would force people, if they're not up to that skill level, I would be pushing them to get up to it as quickly as possible.
And personally, I think in training, actually if people started with tables, but if you then showed them the A1 cell referencing, people would be like, what is this? And you'd be like, oh, it's how we used to do things. And so I think they'd be surprised, because ultimately, if you've got something in a table, that is a structured object, it's a named item. If you've got things just on the grid, I think I refer to them normally as disparate items placed together in a grid structure, which is what they are, because Excel doesn't know that A1 is related to A2, and it's got no idea about relationships or anything. They're just things placed near each other. So just that as an object and the fact that exists is fundamental. I remember Oz du Soleil. This is probably back in the Excel TV days. I wish I could do a good impression of Oz, because it would come across and it would sound awesome. It would carry a lot of weight and a lot of presence. Unfortunately, I don't have his richness of voice, so therefore it's not going to sound quite as good. But when he first encountered tables, I think his phrase was, "Why would I put a table on a table?" Because ultimately, if you think Excel is a grid and that's a table, why would you put a table on a table? That doesn't make any sense. So I think there's a conceptual element there that a lot of people don't understand why you'd even need one. So I can understand that point of view, because why do I need a table? Excel is a table. But once you're over that and you see all the benefits, they're just fantastic.
In R, we have a thing called tidy data sets, and a table means that your data is tidy. It's each column's a data type. You can't have a number in a date. You can't have text in a date. And the amount of work I have to do in cleaning up data is when you have the wrong data type in the wrong column. So having a table encourages that tidiness.
Yeah, and Google Sheets has just added tables.
They have,
and they do enforce types in columns, I believe.
Good. Yeah.
David Benheim just did a talk for us on tables, and I tell you what, they look good. They are pretty impressive. They've got some features that Excel doesn't have. I think they also can you can use dynamic arrays within their tables.
So the table doesn't expand and retract. So ultimately, it's just filling cells. So I'm not sure that their dynamic arrays inside tables is the answer.
I haven't seen it in use. He said it, and I was like, "Oh, that sounds good."
Now, so my sort of experience of teaching tables with people, and I love them, and I joke to people that if they don't have a table in their file, I judge them, because I just think, I'm not saying they don't know what they're doing, but their knowledge is probably limited if they haven't used tables yet, because why wouldn't you use one if you knew about them? But there's always that thing of showing the auto filling of formulas, which impresses people. You go, right, you type a formula in and it just automatically fills in. You insert a row, it's automatically filled in. So beautiful consistency, safer, and all that sort of stuff. And then somebody will put their hand up and go, but what if I just want to put +10 in this cell? And you go, this is why you need tables, because you shouldn't do that. You should never do a +5 in a random cell somewhere. This is why Excel gets a bad name, right? You should if you want an adjustment, add a column called adjustment and type a 10 in there and have another column that is the final adjusted number. But don't disguise your numbers by typing them in some random cells. So yeah, I'm a massive fan, and they're the best thing. before Power Query came along. I think tables were the greatest addition ever, and I would recommend them sort of to anybody. I think the argument that the formula is confusing, I don't know, dollar signs in cells. Do beginners really understand what the dollar signs are doing and stuff when you're dragging formula?
I think that was one of the hardest things to get over, was, you know, the relative and absolute referencing.
I do have quite a lot of sympathy, by the way, for people that are just have never had any Excel training. I do have sympathy for the fact that when you first see things like structured referencing, it's not an easy thing to absorb and get up to speed with. But I still think my very strong position with tables and lots of other things would be like, all right, it's not easy, but suck it up. Like, everything else you need to learn is going to get harder. If you're stuck here and you give up now, I mean, you're not going to get very far as a modeler or an Excel pro, I don't think.
Yeah,
but
a bit harsh. Have I just gone harsher than everyone else?
No. I was thinking when I quote for work, if I know it's all coming from Excel, then the price goes up, because you know it's going to be random all over the place. Not always, but if it's coming from Excel, then there's like okay, we could have anything here.
Giles, in terms of financial modelling with tables, because I view tables more of as a data analysis piece.
Yeah.
Because in terms of financial modelling, are you storing them as like inputs, or if you've got like a rolling forecast, that's where your actuals are coming into? How do you use them in a financial modelling type context?
I'll try and give you the short answer to that. Otherwise, I'll use up the whole hour. But for lots of financial modeling, you wouldn't use tables at all, really, because all of the drivers, or almost all of them, would just be inputs, hard-coded inputs in cells. I think dynamic arrays are way more exciting for the future of financial modeling than tables. Where you would see them used a fair bit is, as you said, when you're bringing in actuals data. Yep. You'd be using Power Query a lot. And then depending on what you do with Power Query, I would still default to you export your, tidy data back into an Excel table in the grid, and you can lean on it that way. I totally appreciate you could shortcut that and shove it in a pivot table. But actually, I think for a lot of financial modeling, what we're talking about is probably a little bit alien to financial modelers, because you just don't deal with data that much.
So actually, you're in that context, you're using tables in more of a data analysis piece that then brings into your calculation chain for your financial modeling. Yeah. Okay.
Basically, yeah. There's a lot of nice automation you can do around actuals and forecasts, and rolling models where you're bringing the last actuals period forward a month. Yeah. Then the outputs of Power Query in your tables is really useful.
For me as well, the killer features with tables, as well as the auto expanding and all that sort of stuff. Number one, if you build a pivot table, I think it should always be a table as the data source, because you add more data to your table and the pivot table will just pick it up, which, when I mention that to people, they go, oh, I never have to click change data source again. You go, yeah, you don't have to. And then the other one is how the name references are just beautiful for X lookups or index match. It's not look up D5 to D7 and bring back E7 to E12. It's like look up the cost center code, bring me back the budget column, and it's all there in the formula. Which is, again, once you know it, and I guess back to your point, Giles, once you know it, it's a much more useful language. But that sort of then leads me to another question: when you're building stuff, and this might be Excel or Power BI, okay, how much should you consider the end user's expertise if they're paying you to develop something for them?
What's a great question.
It's a good one.
Sue, got a thought?
Yeah, lots. So the temptation when you build is to do something all horses and whistles and singing and dancing, and it can do this and it can do that, and I can do this for you, and I can drill down, and I can do. But people are fairly new to Power BI. I always find it's really useful just to start very, very simple. It's just like, and I say to people, it's just like PowerPoint. Just because you have transitions, it doesn't mean you have to use it. So whoever is going to use your report, it's absolutely vital, critical that they are happy using it, not you. And I was in a call this morning with some users, and they were asking questions. And as they were asking questions, I was changing the names of things to relate to is it this or is it this? And let's change it so it makes it explicitly clear to you, not me, because I'm not going to use it every day, but to you, what the meaning behind this visual is and how it works. So from the front end perspective, it's critical that it's built for your users, not you. From the back end perspective, it depends whether you're maintaining it or someone else. Well, actually, no, it doesn't. It's about naming all your steps, putting comments in, being kind to your future self, and documenting and making it really, really clear, not just what's happening, but if you're putting in custom steps for a specific reason, the reason why. And what you can do in Power Query is, and sometimes I might do it, is put in the purpose of this query. This query filters on this specifically because. So you write the business logic to explain the steps that you're carrying out to filter your data. So always, always, always thinking about who is going to be looking after it, and look after yourself if it's you or whoever takes it over, but make those reports completely user-based.
But so my pushback or my follow-up question.
Oh, I love pushback. Yeah, go on.
I love pushback.
Just to be controversial, is look, you're building something because somebody else either hasn't got the time to, or doesn't know how to.
Yes, both usually. It doesn't want to.
Or doesn't want to. So should you? Is there things you shouldn't use because the end user doesn't understand them? Should you not write M code because the end user only understands the button clicks?
No. Yeah, you should write the M code.
Where does your line get drawn between? And that's just one of Jon's arguments in his post, was that the end user was getting confused by the formula, so therefore he wasn't going to use the formula, even though it would have probably been the safest approach to use.
Document. I mean, the great thing with Power BI, if it's in DAX, you can write in the description exactly what it's doing and why it's doing it. If you're putting it in M, you can code and you can comment, and you can put on the properties, you can put comments in for every single thing. So there should be no, even if you are handing it over to somebody who doesn't know, and some of my reports, they don't know how it's built, but they know if they looked into it and somebody else took it over, they would be able to understand the why. So documentation, and DAX allows you to write descriptions, and Power Query allows you to document everything. And my big thing is data modeling. I love data modeling. And so the tabs at the bottom of the data modeling, I split out every fact table, or, so that people can see very clearly what dimension tables are filtering it and how they relate. So it's about trying to make it as clear and concise as possible. So they might not understand, but you can put, and actually, wouldn't that be really nice if you could put a little text box in the dimension, the ones at the bottom of the modeling. Yeah. If you could add a text box in there, I wonder if it's in the properties. That would be quite nice.
More content.
Can I disagree as well now? Just to
with me,
great podcast material. We'll disagree with each other.
Yes, it's just argue. Always gets more views.
Yeah.
I don't like saying if it's arguing.
So I thought Jon's post, I'll have to go back and read it. I thought it was more in the context of training people. From a consultancy perspective, I probably would have a slightly different view. And I've had it before when I was consulting, I would take into consideration some end users and end clients' level of skill and knowledge. I think in financial modeling, it would probably depend on, is this like a transaction model that you're running once and owning and then it's done? Is it an operational model that you're going to hand over and suddenly this finance team is going to be left with the responsibility of using it time after time? So, I have dumbed down certain things for clients after quite a lot of attempting to get them further up to speed. But if there's real resistance, like, no, we don't like it, got to do this. Eventually, as a consultant, I was like, okay, well, you're paying me. I'll do exactly what you've asked me to do. I'm not saying it's necessarily the right thing, but I have done that.
I would say it depends on the context in which you're operating. So if somebody has asked you to build something that they can then use and adapt later on, then yeah, you need to take into account their current skill level. But if you're building something that is a solution in and of itself, effectively you're building some kind of small form of application. Whether that's a good word or not, I don't know.
Yeah.
So as long as the users can interact with the inputs in the right way and get the outputs in the right way, what happens in the background, they don't care. And so therefore, I almost feel like you can build the background however you like. If we take Excel or Power BI, they're not building all that code in the background in a way that I could understand it. Because although I'm the end user, I wouldn't even know how to. I wouldn't know how to look at the source code for Excel or Power BI or any of that. So therefore, they're not writing the code so that I can understand it. And if we apply that in a similar way to our own solutions, it's kind of, if someone's never going to see or interact with that piece, then as far as I'm concerned, I can use whatever features I want, as long as they're in line with their current versions. And hopefully that if another consultant, somebody else comes along later on, that they can then understand what I've done, because I've still applied good practices, I've still applied the right techniques, and I've tried to structure things in the right way so it's clear, but I wouldn't cap it at the person who I'm designing it for. I wouldn't cap it at their skill base, unless of course it's the case of they want me to design it so that they can then use it later on. So if it's a skill and time issue, I would not design it at their level. If it's just a time issue, they just need someone to get this done and then they're going to take it on, then I'd approach it differently.
Sue?
Yeah, absolutely. You would never cap what you do, because that's what you're being paid for, to give your technical expertise. But what I would say, particularly with Power BI, is it's very iterative. So I start off very, very simple and validate the data, tables, etc. And so you're almost going on a journey with your users of the reports, where it's like I mentioned this point, where you're constantly, okay, let's check this. Is this right? Is this what you're looking for? Even if it's 10, 15-minute bursts. So they're in essence building the report for you. And Power BI, it's different in that you have the visual element and the data modeling element. And the data modeling element, most people aren't as au fait with building a model as they are in adding visuals. So it's different in that way. So I would never ever cap the modeling.
And having sort of been in the world of both Power BI and Excel now, I think no one's with Power BI, because it is newer and people are learning it sort of possibly the right way now, sort of actually having some training and other things. There isn't the expectation that they're going to be able to do the stuff that you're being paid for to do. But I think with Excel, there's this expectation that people know Excel. And if you build something, an application, and Excel is we mentioned this last time, you are programming, as you said last time, Sue. It's a programming platform, right? It is a blank slate, and you can build some magical stuff with it. And if you build an application, there shouldn't be an expectation that people can go in the back end and mess about with it. As Mark said, it is just, you are building it. I've had clients who I've built stuff for that's taken 3 months to build, like some sort of oil and gas costing model thing. And then somebody else has come in a few months later, sort of started the role, and they've, the inputs work, the outputs work. They're like, oh, it's a bit complicated. Can we sort of just make it a bit simpler? And it's just like, well, it took me 3 months because of, the complexity of the situation. And if it was some other application built in C#, they wouldn't have asked the question. Or if it's Power BI, they wouldn't have asked the question. But because it's Excel, people have this thing of, well, I just want to tweak it, because I've always been able to tweak other Excel stuff. I think that's been sort of my experience with that.
I think that's a fair point. Yeah.
There was a previous role that I worked in. I built this effectively this application that was for me to control my month end so that we can do things a lot faster. And it took me, I was in that role for 3 years. I think it went through various processes and it built up over time. And eventually I left that role and I handed it across to somebody else. And it was a case of you just change these few cells, you click run, and bang, everything happens. And it should be a glorious thing. About a month later, someone came up to me and goes, "Oh yeah, your spreadsheet's broken." I was like, "What do you mean my spreadsheet's broken?"
It's my baby. I built that.
I walk up to their desk and I'm like, "Well, which bit's broken?" They said, "Well, when I click run, it brings up this error." And I looked at it and I'm like, and there was a whole load of VBA code, and I was like, "Where's the rest of the code?" And they said, "Well, we deleted it. We didn't think it was and it's like you can't stop people from. Here's a thing that works. You just fill in the parameters on the front sheet and click run, and it will go. And they're like, "Oh no, I need to look at this code and tinker around. I've got to change it." So people are desperate to make changes in Excel, even if they haven't got a clue what's going on.
I've got a good story. Again, a quick client story, and it's not really technical Excel, but I've had the benefit of listening to lots of data viz experts over the last few years. So when I did a consulting gig a few years back, it was I turned the existing reports and outputs they had into what I thought was a much better set of outputs with looking at the principles of data viz, hierarchy and visual order and white space and all of this stuff. And it was perfectly in line with all of the best practice principles of data viz. And I shared it and they absolutely hated it. And in the end, they were like, "No, we want you to put it all back to what we had." And I was like, "Yeah, but what you had like all this blue fill everywhere. It's like all I'm looking at is the border. I'm not looking at the numbers and the graphs." And in the end, they just said, "We don't like what you did." It's like, okay, well, I'll do what you've done then. That was it. What'd you do? They didn't like it, even though it was in line with all the principles. And I didn't fight that one too hard.
Yeah,
it's funny. I when I started off, I wasn't sure what to do because I was on many years lecturing. And do I go into training or do I go into development? And I chose development because I just love it, and I'd had enough teaching and lecturing. But one of the things I found was that trying to sell Excel training or advanced training or beginners training to people, because everybody thinks they're advanced. And I remember I worked in one place and we put on some Excel, the office Excel things. And quite a few people failed, and they were horrified that they failed because they say, "I work in Excel all the time." And you work in one small area of Excel all the time, and you're very, very good at that. But it's Excel has just changed, and it's changing at such a phenomenal rate that an advanced Excel user, I wouldn't class myself as an advanced Excel user. And I know my way around Excel, but I'm not advanced because it's such a powerful package.
Yeah.
But people don't recognize that.
When I first started Excel off the grid, I'd have given myself a solid 8 out of 10 at Excel. Then after you start blogging and people start adding comments and you start reading a bit more and you think, "Oh, maybe I don't know as much as I thought I did." And you look further and you work. There's this world that's significantly bigger than you ever thought. So when I started Excel off the grid, I was 8 out of 10. I would now give myself a 5. So that's what 8 years worth of working hard and trying to understand it does. It makes you worse at it because you realize you had no idea at the start. And I was probably a 1, but I didn't have a clue.
Oh, do you know what? This is by the way, 2 things. Number 1, right now is the moment in episode 1 where we started talking about the main topic. I just thought I'd point that out. So we've done incredibly well for episode 2. But is that not a perfect segue into? Didn't we have like imposter syndrome and something like that on the list? Win. Just thinking when Mark's talking about like rating yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. Rating yourself, and I had a similar sort of experience to Mark. Is that I started for Access Analytic 17 years ago, which was essentially an Excel consulting firm and I came from a bank where I was the Excel guy in finance.
Yeah.
And I would have given myself, I said I knew about 80% of what Excel did. And then after sort of like 6 months of working with these guys, I was like, okay, I now know about 20%.
Yeah.
I think after 17 years of daily Excel, I now know I'd put myself back up to about 70%, and then they keep adding stuff. So I'm just going to if I stay at 70%, I'm doing well, because it's getting more, right? And this is your point, Giles, is saying,
totally.
how do you keep up? And what do you do? And are you falling behind? And there's this, you see everybody else posting. So what's your thoughts? Have you got thoughts, Giles, about?
Yeah, I mean, just to add to the like self-rating thing, I think everybody goes through this journey. Years and years ago, at the start of my career, when I started thinking I was brilliant at Excel, I would have put myself in the like 8, 9, 9.5. Look at me with my amazing 10-line formulas. Aren't I clever? And now at most I would put a 7, because I think I'm definitely above an average. I would put myself slightly above 5, but I always think there's more that I need to learn. I'm further behind, in like the gap is bigger of stuff I don't know than it is what I know in that top half. So somewhere between 5 and 7. I've literally just come off a call today with a client that is having the same issue. Like the overall standard of where their team is probably quite a shock to them when they learn about modern Excel and what you can do now versus what you could do 2 years ago. And this goes back to the thing with Jon's tables. I mean, God, if you can't get up to speed with tables, God help you when you get into Power Query and the data model and Python in Excel. And I don't think we all need to be experts in all of them, but you've got to be kind of across enough of them to be able to say, all right, for this thing, Power Query is the right solution. And actually for this thing, Python and Excel might be a good option, or Excel might be the wrong tool completely. I don't even remember what your question was. Did that help?
So, well, yeah, but so really, whether it's Excel or Power BI, here's a question for each of you, just with a yes or no answer, really, or 2 questions. Do you feel like you're falling behind and that other people know more than you? And is it a problem? Sue, what do you think?
No. And do I feel like I've fallen? No. Is it a problem? No. Do you want me to rationalise? Oh,
no. Let's just go around the room, as it were. Mark?
I'll say yes, I am falling behind, but no, it's not a problem.
Cool. Giles?
Yes, I am falling behind, especially when I watch anybody doing the Microsoft Excel World Championship stuff. It would be a problem if I allowed it to mentally, but I'm actually really leaning into publicly saying I'm falling behind, because not that I think I've got a particularly loud voice, but it's just like, look, people that are in the space, if everybody is admitting themselves like, yeah, look, it's really hard to keep up. I'm not here blagging that I'm across everything. Hopefully that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I think it's just I'm falling behind, but slower than most, and I'm happy with that.
Yeah,
so that's and it's sort of, and it's a. So when you say, so going back to Sue, when you say you're not falling behind, what's
my rationale?
What's your rationale there then?
I'm not falling behind compared to the majority of people, because I am living and working and breathing in data, and I'm developing, and everything, in life, really. Well, not everything, because you've got stuff outside, but I'm living and breathing it. And there are lots of people, the majority of people don't get to spend as much time in Power BI as I do. So I'm not worried that I'm falling behind, because I know how strong I am compared to where I was when I started. I know that there are things that I don't know, but I'm not overly worried about it, because, and I've been thinking about this since you mentioned it. It's because I know where to go to find out. So when you first start, and it's probably even harder now because there's even more content, but if something pops up and it's got your name on it, Win, then it's like, okay, Win's done something on this. So it filters it for me. If something comes up and it's got Brian Julius, so I know the people that talk to my brain, that explains things in the way that I understand, and I think that's the difference, is how you understand it. And I'm always on LinkedIn. LinkedIn for me is really good for techie stuff, because people just post things, and I'm like, oh yeah. So I sort of know where to go. So I think Matt Allington said it once about Dax. He says, I'm at peace with Dax. So it's things like that. I'm at peace with where I am because I know where to go and I've got a solid enough foundation to build on.
Yeah, because I find that you're right, that knowing where to look, and knowing you know that something's possible or you're aware of it.
Yeah.
And as long as you can look back at yourself a year ago and think that you know more and you're better than you were a year ago, then that's really the only benchmark that counts so that you have, because Twitter and LinkedIn and other places, you're just judging yourself against 25 other people all the time.
Yeah.
And 25 other people, I see Mark posting and you posting and everybody's doing stuff. It's like, oh, how do they know that? How do they know that? And, and you start to sort of, feel a bit, inferior to it, but you're judging yourself against 20 odd other people. So I think that's the sort of where my brain sort of settled down a little bit when I started getting a bit worried about it.
Yeah.
I think once you are on LinkedIn or wherever else and you're comparing yourself to others, you have to remember that each of those people is only covering potentially one thing. So therefore, they're an expert in that one thing. I remember when I first became an MVP, and I joined up to the Power BI email distribution list, and there was a significant person in the Power BI space who asked a question in there that I knew the answer to. I didn't respond, but equally, I was like, how do you not know that? And the answer was, they specialize in these things, but not these other things. So if you compare yourself to 25 other people, you're comparing yourself to 25 experts in one thing. So you're never going to be the amalgamation. Like you can be general, in which case you know a bit of everything they know, or you can specialize in one thing, in which case you're one of those 25 for somebody else. Yeah. And in terms of whether you're falling behind and whether it matters, over the various years, I've kind of built up frameworks as to how we solve problems and how we think about them and how we approach them. So when new tools come along, so when like Python and Excel came along, the question was, how does this fit into my framework? It's not whether it's Python, Excel. It's not even, do I need to know this? If I don't know it, is it a problem? If it doesn't fit into my framework of how we solve problems, then it's almost an irrelevance, because it's kind of like I've determined this is the optimal way to approach these types of scenarios. So when something else comes along, if it doesn't fit into that optimal way, it's kind of, I'm just going to ignore that because it's not relevant to what I do. If I see somebody then using it in the context, I think actually that would be useful, I'm happy to go back and start using it again. But otherwise, you end up with, we've got our 7-step process that we follow. If something comes along that is outside of that, it's like, well, that's a different use case or a different scenario that's not relevant to the way that I'm teaching people to solve problems. So therefore, it's kind of, if I don't know something, I might be falling behind, but I'm perfectly happy with that because I've determined that thing isn't useful for what I need it for. So, if I think about if something came along that was very heavily financial modeling, it might be relevant for Giles, but I'm there thinking I don't really need to worry about that unless somebody does something that is critical. I think, I should incorporate that into my framework.
This makes me think back to the first book that set me off on my whole kind of, I want to go and do my own thing, which was Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek. Some of you might be familiar with it. And I always remember there's a passage where he talks about what it means to be an expert. And he said that being an expert does not mean you have to be the best in the world at whatever it is. If you went away now, Mark, and read 5 big corporate books on marketing, to the vast majority of people, next week you'd be an expert in marketing. And it always stuck with me, this idea that being an expert is in the eyes of the person you are engaging with. So, and I always try and remember that on the flip side of having amazing amounts of imposter syndrome at times when you think, oh God, there's so much I don't know. It's like, well, hang on a minute, but I also do know a lot and I've got a lot of experience, and it's very helpful to the vast, vast majority of people.
I like asking questions.
Yeah. Well, where do you go to keep up, or where do you go for your, let's say, don't necessarily keep up, but where are you going? Are you forums, people's blogs, people's channels? Where are you guys?
LinkedIn for me probably is scroll through that, and there's people I follow that pop up, and Microsoft's. Giles and I compared our LinkedIn feeds, and mine was very different to his.
Because I spend half my time whinging about other people on LinkedIn. I see one more
data, Power BI, tech, and there are certain people's blogs that I follow, and Microsoft are good in that they do the updates. So I like to keep a track on those as well.
Yeah. You've got views on LinkedIn, Giles, I understand.
Oh God, how long have we got left?
I'll
get really angry if we go too deep.
All right, shall we save it for next time?
You get really angry.
We'll do a teaser for next episode. Giles's opening statement.
Smashing my keyboard.
What I think about LinkedIn. Okay, stay tuned for next week's episode.
Yeah, we'll save that. Personally, that. I do get value from, a lot of the stuff that you guys post as well. I think YouTube quite often for me, like I'll see every time Layla Garani posts a video, which I'll watch straight away. I'll then often quite see that someone like Dim Early or Victor Momo and other people have also posted things on the same topic. So a bit like you said, Sue, I've got certain people that I'm kind of in the habit of absorbing all their content and the way they deliver it now.
Yeah.
I'm much more so I'll scroll through LinkedIn, but a lot of it without trying to get into the LinkedIn.
A lot of it's rubbish, isn't it? You were going to say it, Mark. A lot of it's rubbish.
No, but it's been at least 3 weeks since someone's done the VLOOKUP versus index match debate. And then after that, it'll be another 3 weeks since another one. So there's always someone always wants to solve that problem. But you scroll through and start with you pick up bits here and there. But normally it's most of what I pick up is just through. You're just in the shower and you think, I wonder if I did this and that and I put them together, whether that would be a good solution. So you just. Once you get out of the shower, you have your breakfast, you go to your computer and you try it out and you're like, that's amazing. I can't believe that works. And then, of course, you then put a video on YouTube to which somebody then responds, there's a much easier way of doing that. You just do this. And you're like, why didn't
Chandeep already did that one?
I can't believe I had to overcomplicate this with my thoughts. Can you believe it? So I don't follow that many people. I don't watch that many YouTube videos. On LinkedIn, I might see something and that seems interesting. But often I think the key is about having a deep knowledge of basic things. And once you have a deep knowledge of basic things, you can then apply it to lots of other things. So if you really understand arrays, or if you really understand data model and how to structure a data model, then things start to flow through. So it's more about simplification of everything rather than about learning more and more and more.
Can I have one more?
Yeah, Sue.
I have my meetup group. So I have a weekly meetup group, and anyone that I find interesting, because people say to me, why do you do it every week? That's so much time you put into it. I get a one-on-one 1 hour session on people teaching me things that I'm interested in. So I had Jake Duddy, Tuesday evening, an hour on Git and development and prod and UAT testing and Visual Studio Code. And the week before we had Pavel. I mean, they're both such intelligent people, and they give an hour session. So I get an hour session every week on topics that I'm interested in. Because if I'm interested in it, I reach out and I say, can you come to my user group? And I get an hour's tuition, which obviously everyone shares in. And because I'm interested, I have questions. But I think for me, that's probably one of my key ways as well.
I need to listen back to this because I think Sue started with anyone I find interesting rather than anything I find interesting, which makes me think if it's anyone she's found interesting, why have I not been invited? But by the end, she said anything. I mean, they're two different things. I'm going to have to listen to this back, whether she said anyone or anything. And then once that happens, I'm then going to decide whether I'm going to be offended or not. So by next week.
I didn't have much to deal with you before this podcast, and now I do. So you'll find an invite coming.
But Sue's right about meetup groups, because Sue did one for the Toronto Excel meetup group. That's our first run across.
That's how I met you. Yeah.
She did all this stuff around how you connect Power or get stuff in Excel from Power BI, and you just sit there and it's like, that was a great session. There's loads of great sessions at meetup groups. I did forget about those. They are really good because you get to go deep on stuff rather than summary.
Ask questions. Like Wynn's one. Wynn's was just brilliant.
Of sort
how
of a
you set up
bad
today,
sort of.
Hmm?
So, well, I have this sort of bad habit where I see an article, I then forward it. I'm on my phone. I'll forward it to do. So on my
Yeah.
to-do list, I have a to read later list
Yeah.
for Power BI, a to read later for Excel, and a to read later for something else, just general business stuff. And they just go in. I just put them in that. And I never read them.
I tried that.
There's just
I
this
tried that.
500 list of
Yeah.
like stuff I haven't read. It just does not work. So what I do now is I just take the time to read one post a day,
Yeah.
if that. And sometimes I don't even manage that. And it could be from Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever sort of, and meetup groups and stuff like that as well. So just trying to keep on top of it that way. But just again, little bits. And like you said, Mark, it's like when lambdas came out, I was like, oh, okay, I can see a bit of a use. Python came out, I was just like, not going to be my cup of tea. You know, there's just, I want to focus in other areas. It's not relevant to me right now. Might be, I know who to ask and whose videos to watch if it becomes relevant. And that's really all I can do.
Yeah, when lambdas came out, I was like, I originally thought that's not for me. I don't need it. It doesn't fit into my framework. And then you start to see a few use cases, and like, I get it now.
Yeah.
And so now it's kind of like, I'm happy to build that in. But until then, it's like I'm going to park that until something comes along that I think is actually useful.
And I think that's the critical thing, isn't it? You don't have to do it immediately. Kurt Buhler, I hope I pronounced his surname right. He writes for Data Goblin, and he's absolutely brilliant. And he did a post about imposter syndrome and about learning. And he said, you don't have to do it straight away. You know, don't put that pressure on yourself, you know, because we only live once. So know that it's there, but you don't have to know everything about it. Just know where to go when you need it for whatever you're doing.
And I would much rather suffer from imposter syndrome than, you know, Dunning-Kruger. At the very least, like I think there's a nice humility in, my God, there's just so much I don't know.
Thinking you know it all. Yeah, that curve.
It's so dangerous, isn't it?
About.
It's so dangerous.
Yeah, when you think you know it, you're in trouble. I just always, like, if I ever sort of start to get carried away, I always just hark back to my early days of Excel when I realized after 4 years that there was a remove grid lines checkbox, because previously I was making all the cells white. 4 years of doing that, right? So we all learn, we all get there eventually. All right, look, we're coming up to the hour, I think. So any closing thoughts from anybody or anything else that somebody was wanting to just mention before we wrap up today? We all good?
Yeah.
We genuinely going to talk about LinkedIn next week, because I'll prepare a speech
we'll
for you.
Oh no,
So
I'm not doing it if he's
time.
going to do a speech.
No?
It's not a speech, it's a rant.
It will just be a vicious rant.
I've heard you rant about it before. It's just dull.
See you in Budapest. So I'll rant to you in person.
Well, you're going to have to run then if you're going to come to Budapest.
No, I'm coming. I'm just not running.
I thought we'd got away this whole episode without any, and they dropped it in the last minute just to get the word run in there.
He's booked Budapest Marathon and he's booked the hotel.
Yeah, I will be there in the hotel. I'll be there on the side of the street at mile 26 with a Guinness, cheering you on.
I don't want Guinness. I want cider.
It's not for you. It's for me.
You don't get Guinness if you don't run.
I will.
It's his new regime. That's what he's doing. It's the new Guinness regime.
His new regime, and he's doing well at it.
Well, maybe Mark will take your place now.
Mark, you can have it. Do you want my marathon place in Budapest?
I don't know what day it is, but I'm busy. I'm pretty sure I've got a thing on that day with the bloke with the brown hair. I'm meeting him.
That guy.
So yeah,
he's practicing his Osda Soleil impressions that day. All right, folks. Well, let's wrap it up. Okay, thank you everybody for listening, and we'll hopefully catch you in the next episode. Catch us on YouTube and Spotify. Hopefully, Apple Podcasts in the next 5 or 6 days. So yeah, all exciting. Thanks, folks.
Lovely hanging out, people.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.